When the credits start rolling, but the movie keeps haunting you.
Before, after.
Then it's time to tune in to Dismembering Horror. We'll talk about what worked and also what didn't. We'll dissect every aspect. Maybe some of we shouldn't.
They turned out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Take it away, boys.
Hello, Tim.
Ryan, I'm going to stop you. I'm going to stop you right now and just this is a alert to all listeners. Alert to all listeners. We have an official The Worst Movie I've Ever Seen report coming in hot. Worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life. I cannot say enough bad things. Go ahead, Ryan. What were you going to say?
Oh, well, I was just in the middle of saying hello, Tim.
Oh, hi. Hi, how are you?
And hello, listeners. As our wonderful host just said, this is Dismembering Horror, episode 174 of Dismembering Horror. So for today, we're going to talk a bit about, I mean, I don't know if Tim's talking about a different movie or what, but today we're here to talk about Leprechaun Returns, as well as...
No, that's it. That's it.
Well, as well as we're going to touch a bit on, I think, the OG Leprechaun in our discussion here, because it is some good context, I think. And
I just want to say that I had the feeling while we were watching it that you might enjoy it more than me.
I think that's a fair and accurate assessment, which you will find to be extremely true.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hey man, you just let us dive in on the deep end here. The only other thing I just wanted to say for today, just to acknowledge, we like to keep in touch with our whole history of our show and movies we've done, and if there's news of remakes of them coming out or anything at all of that applicable to them. This one's actually not exciting remake news, but I just had the thought, this is actually kind of old news, especially by the time you're listening to this, but with the filmmaker Ivan Reitman passing away, who did Ghostbusters, Twins, Kindergarten Cop, all those movies. We know him here as Dismembering Horror, as the director of Cannibal Girls. So
that's right. A true classic.
Yeah, which we dismembered in episode 91 of our show, Canadian film Cannibal Girls. So
I think, R.I.P. It's sad. I mean, it's always sad when people die.
Yeah. All is to say exactly that. Just acknowledge it. Because, you hear directors of Ghostbusters, but just fun for our little bubble of Dismembering Horror to say, also the director of Cannibal Girls.
Yeah. Oh, another thing, happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone.
Yeah, if you're listening to this today in fresh, and that's, if you didn't guess, that's why that was our inclination to review Leprechaun Returns. All right, well,
Are you a big St. Patrick's Day fan? Is it a big important holiday for you, Ryan McDuffie?
No, as you know, maybe you know how I was just forgetting it now. Even I did not enjoy growing up like people like this is more elementary school thing, but I feel like went all the way into college, post college a little bit of people like policing the wearing green on the day. Always felt weird to me.
That is like the dumbest thing.
But to say what I do like about it, aside, I guess, if you're in the mood, an excuse to go out and drink or whatever, is I always forget what it's called, St. Patrick's Day, which, from planning this. And I always default to calling it Leprechaun's Day. So that's the side that I love about it is it's Irish connection. And then take it another step, it's Leprechaun connection. Take it yet another step, it's Leprechaun to the Leprechaun the movie connection.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can say that I don't know. It's my grandmother's birthday, St. Patrick's Day, so like that's always cool.
Cool.
She was as Irish as you kind of can get in the States. Not born there, but her parents were.
Right.
So,
Your middle name is Ryan, which seems like
my middle name is Ryan. Your first name is Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was her name O'Grady?
No, her name was Ellen Norman. And I think her mom's maiden name was O'Reilly, I think.
Just
Something like that.
Same enough. Yeah, dirt to same. Good enough.
Yeah.
Just not O'Grady, as I think the names of the ones who lay the curse in the original Leprechaun.
Right.
All right.
Oh my God.
Well, to talk about Leprechaun the movie, let's dive. We've already dove in at the beginning here. So let's continue to swim in the deep end here and move on with our trailer and get into it for Leprechaun Returns.
You must be one of the girls. Fixing up the old house way out there from campus.
You know about that?
Small town.
My mom used to live here.
She didn't tell you anything about the place where you're going?
No? Everything okay?
Yeah, everything. He made sure of it.
You guys really going off grid?
By the end of summer, we'll have moved all our electricity to solar and all our water to the well.
There's no internet?
No internet and no cell service either.
Hello?
I've got a lot of killing to make up for.
This can't be real.
Hello, Tim.
Unacceptable.
Well, Tim, you've already let us know your feelings, so you want to just go ahead and fill that out and let us know your rating per our rating system. Would you tell yourself to avoid, stream, rent, or buy Leprechaun Returns?
This is falls right in that very small batch of movies we've watched that is essentially an avoid at all costs. I think there have been a couple movies where we've felt similar. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. What was that one with Arnold?
Maggie.
That was pretty bad too, but in a totally different way.
What about The Girl Next Door?
That's for sure right on par. But here's what it is. There's a specific difference in why those movies were bad. I mean, each movie is bad for its own reasons. But this movie is bad on a certain level that is upsetting to me for a couple reasons. One, the writing is, I think that they were trying to be camp. There's this weird line of when you try to be camp and it just does not work. It's so insultingly bad. Characters do things that just completely defy all basic rationale or logic. And I think in service of an attempted joke or humor, and all of it just is bad. It just doesn't work. So, I mean, I'm already saying what doesn't work, but overall, that's the reason I think it's so bad. It just falls flat constantly for some really fundamental reasons. Whereas The Girl Next Door is bad because I think the director doesn't know anything about how human beings behave, and it just makes no sense in that sort of way. And Maggie just seemed I don't even remember Maggie. There was nothing to it in a way.
But both of those were trying to be more, I mean, they're completely different in that they were actually trying to be serious with a lot of times serious subject matter at play. So that's, maybe just where I will always find those films more frustrating. Here, it would actually kind of work in its favor if they weren't accurate depictions of humans and how humans work.
Yeah. So we'll talk about it later, but there is a very specific example of, it's actually the type of camp that I love the most, which is the Evil Dead 2 style of camp. And I think in the wrong hands, it just simply is bad. And this is an example of that. And we'll, in things of note, there's a couple of things I want to talk about as to why I think it was attempting to do that and failed.
All right. Well,
I mean, look, I had a very hard time even paying attention to this movie because it was just one thing after another of like reasons why I wanted to turn it off.
Tim,
I almost called you. And was like, no,
I'm sad.
I can't do it.
I'm sad you didn't end up. I mean, I ended up doing the double feature I thought you were doing, which was watching the original first.
I wanted to. I just ran out of time.
Yeah.
So I was like, damn, I have to watch this one first. And then once I got through this one, I was like, I am not turning the other one on. Like, I just don't have the capacity for it.
Right. Well, I mean, that would have been the reversed order anyway, so whatever.
Right.
Okay, well, this may be our most differentiating opinion on an episode ever, Tim. So can I tell you where I'm coming from now and give you my rating?
Please. God.
All right, well,
I will come over there and I will strangle you to death while laughing like a leprechaun if you give this a buy.
All right, we'll see you soon. I give the original and this one a buy it, hands down.
I cannot believe you.
All right, here he comes. He's taking off the headphones.
This is the officially the last episode of Dismembering Horror.
Well, it's been a good run, Tim. But maybe in an effort of radical empathy, you'll hear where I'm coming from by the end of the episode and not want to strangle me quite so much.
I'll listen, but I don't know if I'll hear where you're coming from.
Thanks for your ear. That's all I can ask for. So, context on the original, because I will say, there is a distinguishment in the kind of camp that the original is that versus this one, but they're same and different. So this is high praise, or it's going to sound like heavy stuff for Leprechaun movie. But honestly, I'm looking back when I think of being a kid and like looking at all the sort of boxes of horror movies and even seeing them at a young age. Leprechaun was the scariest to me. You think of like visually and just sort of, here's the thing. There's the trapped in a room with test where if it's Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, you just feel like, oh, I'm dead. I'm screwed, right? So this is more coming from a place of just like visual feel, like a certain kind of evil and sinister coming from them, right?
Poster appeal.
Yeah, sure. A different kind of trapped in the room, if just sort of like physical threat aside. And Chucky, I know he strikes a sort of... I know some people who are like, Chucky just scares, is always the most terrifying to me. So Chucky's based, though, like he's Tommy Lee Ray or whatever his name is. He's a human soul when it comes down to it. So that's where maybe he doesn't have the edge on this leprechaun. But something about this leprechaun and how he like looks, especially in the original, a little bit more so. I was fine with them changing the look for the new one. But just like, I can still kind of attach myself. I'm much more older and jaded and not actually afraid now, but I can still remember as a kid.
Don't lie.
Like that feel. Maybe in a certain mood or with the right kind of help, I could feel it still. But it's like, I mean, I'm not the only one, because like the joke in Wayne's World 2 of Wayne torturing Garth about being afraid of the leprechaun. I'm the leprechaun. Whoa! Stop it! Like I'm not the only one out there for that joke to have worked in that movie. There's like, leprechaun. So I'm coming from that perspective, where there's just something near, and I'll admit, like my friend and I mentioned, binged all these movies, except this newest one, a few years ago. No, longer than that ago now. And they're all like, they're also like the Hood ones are terrible. They're kind of all terrible.
Oh
the first one does hold a special place for me too. So
that's fair.
Yeah, okay, well, here, that's enough.
Just remember, like, what we're saying here is that this is what we would tell ourselves, too. Like, it's just not for me.
Right. So just to I'll save most of this for, the what worked, which sounds like I'll be mostly the one talking for that section. If not,
I have a couple things.
But I don't know. So I'm coming from there, but I'm just much more a fan of camp. And I think it's interesting with you, like, I was thinking, oh, Tim liked Jack Frost. He's going to really like this movie. That's where I was assuming you were at when, I came down for this. But, like, I liked Dolly Dearest more than you. So there is this kind of, like, line where I'm just kind of like, I have no idea. It's just something particular about something that Tim, I don't know where he's going to fall at any given mark now with camp.
I have thought this movie has illuminated some of the reasons why I like where the line is, like what causes camp to work for me or not work.
Right. So I will say I do enjoy more overall the kind of camp that the original has. And I say that distinguishment for me is how much is unintentional and not self-aware versus intentional and self-aware, which I think this Leprechaun Returns falls more in the camp of. Sorry, confusing word, camp. You know what I mean? Been using it two ways here.
Camp with a K, obviously.
But I can still really get on board with that. Where where they do have if they're filmmakers that have a certain understanding of what camp is, you can't like actually make a Dolly, like intentionally make a Dolly Dearest original Leprechaun. But I think you can do enough just to sort of hone in to what like other tenets that do work, even if you are still self-aware of this kind of film. So largely for what worked, I would just want to kind of define what this type of movie is and then where it falls on that sort of line of intentional or not intentional, and kind of use both Leprechauns as examples. So how about, can you give us a super quick summary and then we'll move on with all that?
Sure. All right.
Sorry,
25
buy
years.
it if I wasn't clear.
Yeah, well, we got it, Ryan. Don't remind us. So 25 years after the events of the original Leprechaun with starring Jennifer Aniston and Warwick Davis and that other guy,
Mark Holton.
That guy. We return to the house that those events took place on, which is now being converted into a sorority house for the nearby college. And the daughter of Jennifer Aniston, what was her original name? Trudy or something?
Tori.
Tori. Trudy. So Tori Redding's daughter, Lila Jenkins, is showing up. She wanted to go back there. I didn't really understand why.
She's going to college in the same town.
Well, yeah, I get that, but whatever. She wants to reconnect with her roots, I guess. So she goes back.
She wants to stay it just so happens she, I guess, offered up this old property of hers to the sorority she's a part of. Right,
exactly. Okay, so she's going back. They're fixing it up. That's the whole deal. That's why they're there. And I don't know why, but the leprechaun who had seemingly been defeated by melting from a shamrock and being sent down the well comes back.
Because it's because when Mark Holton reappears as Ozzy, we learned that in order to fully destroy a leprechaun, you have to fully destroy every part of them, like in a fire or something like that. So they only sort of disintegrated the leprechaun, so we know there's still a piece of him waiting to come back. And also, Ozzy is still carrying inside his stomach somehow the gold coin from the original, which helps give its power to Leprechaun. So by
I must have missed the gold coin in the stomach bit.
Well, if you had marathoned them back to back like I had, you would have known. So just that proximity combined of the gold coin allows the essence from the water of the well to leap into Ozzy, and then using Ozzy's innards allows the leprechaun to recreate itself.
Got it. Yes, I got that part. And so therefore Leprechaun is out, and they have to, defeat him somehow because he wants all of his gold. The end.
All right, great. And then we can move on. And I don't even know if you mentioned it's him versus sorority people and a couple dudes.
Right.
All right. Here we go then into what worked.
What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
Look, just allow me to get this out of the way. There are gags and gore that I liked. So anytime gooey green liquid is blowing around the room from the leprechaun, I'm into it. She hits his head at one point and it comes off.
Yeah.
And then he puts it back on. That totally into that. That those moments, the mailman the mailman moment, great. I'm totally into the gimmick, I guess, of the movie, the promise of the premise that is a evil leprechaun wants to kill people in gratuitously ridiculous ways. That pays off for me. Those are the only moments in the entire movie that I kind of perked up and was like, hey, something. So that's, to be fair, those are the only things that worked for me in this entire movie. Absolutely nothing else did.
Should I second the sort of kills and gore effects now, or sort of rewind and go to some overarching things? What do you want to hear?
I think you should bookend this entire section by coming back around to the gore at the end.
All right. So more on this type of movie and sort of tenets of it. And I this is where I thought it could be, I like having you here to kind of help me define what this kind of movie is. Camp is the word we've been using already. But some things that I have that help define it. And this is sort of referring to the original and this one. So I don't know. It's hopefully stuff that can apply to both, but sometimes here may apply to one more versus the other. So examples, like I already mentioned, this kind of movie that we've done, Jack Frost, Dolly Dearest. But I define them as they feel like between B and C level. There's not that's where they land for me. They're a level where I can enjoy them, where they don't take themselves too seriously, or you could say they take silly and not being serious seriously, but they aren't as far for me, as, I'll still watch these too, but the Z grade, Six-Headed Sharktopus NATO, those kinds of movies, it's not so far on that end.
So for clarification on those categories, A, B, C, and you're saying camp, right? Camp is the overall category we're in, and there's an A and a B and a C within that camp umbrella.
No, I meant just sort of separate those for now, and just sort of what we think of as A-list star, B-list star, C-list star.
Oh, okay.
Just those kind of generic terms.
Would you say that Freddy Krueger is A-list?
I think
B-list? I'm trying to get a sense here, Ryan.
I would define sort of, since that one's so mainstream and released by something like New Line Cinema and made it onto lunch boxes, that's a kind of what you'd call A-list horror. But I think you could have some people who just define anything that's like that as horror as a B movie.
Right.
So parse that how you will, and this is all subjective anyways.
But I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
In other words, you're kind of saying good middling and like demonstrably purposefully bad.
Yeah. And sometimes the point where it is, I think how you reacted to this one is how I can kind of feel about like a Poultrygeist or something like that, where I'm just like, this is like just a little too much, you know, like I could be in the mood and get down, but like, I don't know. I don't know.
I get you. I actually agree with what you're saying.
So I love the Leprechaun movies, their first one and this one are like the sweet spot for me. Like I think Jack Frost was that for you, it sounded like your favorite of those movie. I think like Leprechaun is just tied or kind of just takes the edge over that one for me, the original. And this one kind of close regards. There's something about like the overall premise, like really it is what I love about movies, is that you can take something as ridiculous as like an evil leprechaun and make it happen and have it be fun. And like a kind of other, trait that I'll list here is like, something that's like in the original one where you have the old O'Grady guy just so sincerely, taking out a 4-leaf clover and, casting the leprechaun into the box with it, but like going hard and taking it seriously. Like it's just so good in my eyes.
You're touching on the thing for me.
Okay.
This is a defining thing that separates good from bad for my taste.
All right.
The intention of going fully into the world and like buying into the world as an actor is a huge part of what I think makes this type of movie successful or not.
Yeah.
Like Bruce Campbell is so committed to the world that Sam Raimi is creating in the Evil Dead movies, like so committed that he ends up helping define the world that much more.
Yeah.
And so if you middle on that, or if you reject it even a little bit as a performer, it's going to undercut the whole thing. And
I think, the original, definitely all the actors, they operate on that level for me. And this one, I think Lyndon Porco plays Leprechaun in the newest one. Maybe not quite on the level of Warwick Davis, but still like, I don't know, is on that level for me of not being too self-aware, but committing to the world like I liked. But like the other characters, as far as I can say with this one and the original, like that level of like Jennifer Aniston Tori in the original, where it's like as soon as we say just from her first line before she even speaks, we're like, oh my god, she's such the obvious stereotype of like spoiled California girl, like complaining about cobwebs, everything, what are we doing here, Dad? And it like hits you over the head with it again and again and again. And I think that's a tenet of these kinds of films that I like too. And I think this one did that well, and that can still work in a self-aware way where like I enjoyed having the sorority sisters each being just like over the top clear in their stereotype. Like there's a level of fun that's in this B-C grade movie where it's even taking stereotypes further than a Friday the 13th movie. Like that's a good example of what I'd call a B movie, and this is just the kind of B-C movie in between. That's kind of an example where I'm coming from, where there's, I don't know, it just pushes whatever fun does come from killing off stereotypes or just watching them interact with a killer leprechaun in this case, just that much more. So extremely forced stereotypes I have down as sort of defining this type of movie. Things working better if they don't entirely make sense. And that can come from, like the original or Dolly Dearest or Troll 2, even an oblivious place. But they can come from a self-aware place if it's sort of from a deep place of like, it doesn't matter. We don't care about this explanation. Like, I think that can work, this kind of film. Like, it doesn't matter how quickly he got from there to here, whatever. It doesn't matter this rule of the world, things like that. So you can do that well in a self-aware way, but there's also, of course, the certain charm that comes from when it's not self-aware. the kind of quips and humor which are just like beyond Freddy Krueger eye rolling. Maybe
beyond.
Yeah. So maybe not like on the level of Jack Frost where you're like, okay, there are a couple in there that are actually kind of, kind of got me. But there's something just when they're so bad consistently that I like.
Okay.
But that humor can also come from a unique kind of kill that you can only do, which, we'll get to later what those were in Leprechaun Returns. That and again, it's like promise of the premise. You have a killer leprechaun, like humor, great, can work in either self-aware or not self-aware. And then my favorite is probably the strange quirks that come with these films. The like set up with the original. Like I just loved the quirk of the leprechaun where has an obsession with shoes. Like, I don't know if that comes from some obscure leprechaun lore, but it's just is so funny in the original when it's like, that's how they distract him is by throwing dirty shoes at him or whatever that he has to then clean up. So I love that they carried forth with that with this one. It was cracking me up. That was great.
Did that come around in a helpful way at the end?
No, it just sort of, it's like an element. It's not something that's at the level of needing a payoff for me. Like they're just these sort of weird, again, just sort of quirks or details, about that are consistent with the leprechaun. And again, those are kind of best if they're done in the less self-aware kind of movie, the original Leprechaun, a Troll 2 or whatever. Like some examples from the original one I like so much of that are there's this shot where it's like they keep thinking they thwart him and then Leprechaun just pops out of nowhere again. So it's like there's a moment where Leprechaun pops out of the fridge in the original and there's just something about the shot that's just like, something's going to happen, but I don't know. I don't even know what I'm trying to say with that one, but it's weird. It's something that could only be done on this kind of movie I'm trying to define. And then like Ozzy and his friend in the original where you have like this sort of strangely touching moment where it's like as weird and obvious as is of Ozzy's little friend being like, if they're kind of like what are they called? The Of Mice and Men characters, Lenny and
I was thinking
whatever.
the same thing. Yeah.
Where it's like, if we get the money from the gold, we could fix your brain and give you your operation. It's like, that's simultaneously just like ridiculous, but also kind of weirdly touching in this world. And just, I don't know, it's just strange moments with the both of them. Anyway, so that was always, I was trying to define this kind of movie. And again, but the differentiation between, or just so this sort of line that you can be in at any given point with them is how much are you aware versus self-aware? How much is intentional versus unintentional camp? Which the original, I think, is more on the side of unintentional, but still self-aware, to a regard. They know they're making a killer leprechaun movie. This one, I mean, to kind of jump ahead to a thing of note, the director of this one was a filmmaker of a film that you recommended, The Void. I still haven't seen. And, they drop names of filmmakers. So it's like clearly, and I don't know, I think there's some good setup and payoff of this. I could tell they put thought into this movie. Maybe it sounds like you disagree, but
I think they tried.
Okay. But you can see
failed.
It's the kind of intentional camp. Yeah. Something that else feels kind of fun and unique this style, like what you said, something that's the appeal of the Evil Dead 2 kind of vein. Like I loved the shots that are like those my favorite was the point of view of that like hay barrel, like that old metal hay barrel when he jumps on it and is running on it and then it launches from a sort of POV of this metal hay barrel thing at the dude. That was great. Anyway, that's a more specific thing. So I am kind of over with my grander how to define the type of this movie things and onto a bit more specific things here. Should I continue?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, God, this is just so funny with how much you hated this, but like I sort of referenced this in my reaction video that I made right after watching this, but this had a scene or moment that was just one of the most joyous moments of any film we've ever watched for our show, which was like coming off of the original. I was like, okay, what are some like key things about Leprechaun that I hope that they better continue with this one? And I'm like, how he rides little vehicles. Like the first one, you have him like on a wheelchair. You have him on this like mini sized car. Like it's just so funny. So when Leprechaun appears on a drone piloting it himself with the remote, like I was clapping. I was so happy. It was just, again, like what about something you could only do, I don't know, in a movie that embraces this kind of ridiculousness, but is exactly what you want from it. It was like, I cannot tell you how happy that moment made me. Like I was here alone like a crazy person clapping. The visual, the surprise of just totally unexpected, and getting that payoff too of wanting the Leprechaun riding a little vehicle and having it be that drone and just not seeing it coming. God damn, I was so happy. I loved that scene.
That's fair. I mean, again, I can get behind the idea.
All right.
So, and I think that kill is funny
yeah.
and ridiculous and fun. And like, it's tipping toward what I would want.
And that's a good kill at that kill is a good example of something I'm talking about that I think's works both on the aware and self-aware level of as far as some things not mattering in this kind of level of film, which is he could have easily moved out of the way, but just stands there to take the drone coming into his mouth. Mm-hmm. But in this kind of movie, it just didn't matter.
Yeah. So my problem is that in the execution of a camp moment like that, where he could just move out of the way, they don't do anything to raise the level of absurdity from a film film sort of gag way to make us sort of laugh at why he doesn't move out of the way. So in other words, like here's just an example of a way you can do this. It's the same absurdity that you see in, to mention him again, in a Mike Myers movie in Austin Powers, when the guy is standing in front of the steamroller and it cuts back and forth of him being like, no. And he could easily just walk out of the way, but they go back and forth. They overemphasize the absurdity in that moment of him not getting out of the way. But in this movie, there is very little of that kind of joke in the filming of it. And so that's where I'm coming from a lot of the time, where I just go, oh, they're missing out on an opportunity, because I like that kill. And what I would want to see is, as the drone is coming toward him being like, oh my God, no, and then cutting back to it getting closer. And he keeps just cutting back to him being like, whatever it is, something that makes us go, that's so dumb and over the top that I'm on board with him not getting out of the way. And they just don't do it. He just tips his chin up and you go, well, why do you do that?
Wow. You do hate this movie because never before have you said screw it so hard to our format here and had to have jumped ahead to what did not work.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that I like the idea.
Okay, great.
So the idea works.
Great. All right.
And then falls apart in execution.
Now I'm trying not to jump ahead to what didn't work here, but I would say this was an example of, I don't want too many. There's self-aware that works, but then there's kind of breaking the fourth wall level self-aware, which that example of what you just gave, I think would have been too far in that realm for me. And there were moments like that did not work for me in this movie.
Interesting.
Okay. So, as a fan of the original, and I just loved all the connections to the original, like to have the same location, which is just so funny because it's like Leprechaun. Like you wouldn't think that would ever be a level of film where they sort of recreate the original location to go back to, like, it's the same house, it's the same barn, it's the same well from the original Leprechaun.
me and everybody else, like, why does the original movie even exist in that environment? Like, why does it take place there?
It's like
what?
The dad buys or inherits the house. Like the leprechaun getting trapped there happens 10 years earlier. The dad buys the house for some reason, and he takes his daughter just to kind of go there. I forget if they're actually moving there or just sort of staying there for the summer. I think they're just kind of...
So it's just total happenstance.
I think they're staying there for the summer. Yeah, they just happened to buy this old abandoned house.
And why was there a leprechaun curse thing in that place in the first place?
You didn't even watch the Leprechaun original recap I sent you, huh?
No, I couldn't.
Okay.
I couldn't handle it.
It's because the original owner of the house was a businessman who had traveled to Ireland and
oh my God,
had trapped the leprechaun, which is how you get a leprechaun's gold. So came back with the leprechaun's gold, and then unbeknownst to him, the leprechaun was mad and just followed him back to America.
How do you appease the leprechaun? What's the true solution of the leprechaun, curse?
Well, to put it under what worked for me is just his unsatiable, single-minded fixation on his gold, which he obsessively counts and like has to make sure he has every piece of gold. Like, that's just great single-minded obsession. That's his motivation. That's at the core of who he is just this greedy little leprechaun.
So in theory, if he got all of his gold, all of it back, and could count it all and have it, would he just be like, okay, I'm good, back to Ireland?
Yes and no. Yes, if I was going by just the first one, I'm a little confused based on his character in the second one, which we'll get into in our next section.
Interesting.
So more on just its connection to the original. I mean, yeah. So what I was saying was the fact that, yeah, same location, just for something where it's so unlikely that you'd ever imagine in a million years them making a requel to Leprechaun. It just tickles me so much that they just to see it recreated. And then same with Pee-wee's Big Adventure is my favorite movie, to see Mark Holton as Francis from this movie. Love him in the original. That was my second clapping moment when he first appeared in this one. And at first it was I went on this whole journey with him getting killed at the beginning, which was like, no, how could they do that? Where I was actually into it. But then I was like, okay, but they gave him a great death. It was so gory, the leprechaun bursting out of him. I loved it. So that was great. But then they actually satisfied me and kept him in the rest of the movie by appearing in ghost form, and had some great moments in that, where he mimes the whole story of the first one to her and she doesn't understand it at all. Just any moments like him. I mean, any scene with him was great. I just loved seeing him again. And that's, again, just tickled me so much that it's Mark Holton from the original. It's smart too, I think, how if you're going to do a requel, but kind of change the, I don't know, just, it's going to look a little different. The tone's going to be a little different. The guy who plays Leprechaun is different. I thought it was really smart to open it how they did, where you have, you hit but still be a sequel to the original. You hit those end beats, you rehash those end beats of the original, but within your own world and within the look of your own Leprechaun. That was a really cool, smart way, I thought, to bridge the sort of not just time gap, but the sort of two worlds that of what is different about this one and the original.
Yeah, I appreciated just a little, sort of recappy reintroduction feel.
Yeah. Not to mention too, the fact that they didn't call it just Leprechaun was refreshing after, Halloween and Scream. Now that all being muddled. And I love too, it was just kind of this was an example of where it is fun to sort of get on board with the filmmakers being self-aware of it, but the details on the treasure map of their their rules that they wrote down of how to like defeat the leprechaun or, the rules of the leprechaun both work in that sense of it's fun in the movie world of the characters keeping track of that stuff, but also sort of shows, okay, here's like where the filmmakers and then also us are kind of like latching on to as the rules of the leprechaun. Because that's kind of one of the fun things of the original too is, and maybe to this one to an extent, but just like his powers are just kind of all over the place. And all the sequels too, where it's like he changes sizes in the space one and the original, he like can teleport, but like only so far, he like when he's going after on the bicycle or the skateboard or whatever in the original, I think he's on the tricycle, and he like teleports to just behind the truck, but not on the truck. Like, he can sort of shoot magic and chains out of his fingers and interact with objects. Any other just fun little connections I got a kick out of the original of having a Jennifer Aniston sound alike, and that's another rule or power of the leprechaun is mimicry. That was fun. Even
wish granting.
Yeah. I love their names of the original written on the brick in the wall. The stuff that I thought you would have liked was the setup payoff stuff, whether it's when the kind of couple is on the roof putting up the solar panels and she's haranguing him about screwing them in or nailing them in the wrong way. And that comes back to be a part of his death, getting split down the middle. That was great.
Sure. I can appreciate a good setup and payoff of a kill.
I forget what it's called, like the water suction thing that you use to suck water out through a hose. I forget what that's called, but they set that up and it comes back later for putting the hose down the leprechaun's mouth and killing with the clover juice. And then it gets the drone. I was just kind of like, what is this? Like, where is this going to go? But then of course that paid off too. That was great.
Right.
And now to kind of just catch up too with the book ending, like
and the shovel, the trowel trophy.
Yeah. yeah.
Seemed fitting. Yep.
So now to bookend a bit with, to catch up on some of those kills that I thought were so great. Mentioned the split down the middle, the drone death you kind of mentioned, but I thought was so great. Just hadn't seen it before. There was something really satisfying about a head squish, but the head is inside of a metal mailbox getting run over by a truck. It was great.
Yeah.
Kind of second to just the joy and ecstasy of the moment, just pure film of the moment of him riding the drone. I thought second to that was him conducting to Beethoven's Ninth, was it? With the one girl, the stoner girl, is trying to escape through the sprinklers, and he starts conducting the sprinklers to the non-diegetic music that he's hearing too. That was just another kind of beautiful, I don't know, just symphony, to take that word. But in movie terms, I just thought was great and inspired. I loved it. And then also I was at the end when they defeat him, I was already just so excited and oh, cool. They defeated him once, but it was good. The movie was tuned in a writing sense where it was but we still have to have a bit more, after they blow him up. It's no, he's still not totally dead. We should get a bit more. So to have that pay off with him turning into a bunch of little leprechauns, just so many things that are straight out of the Evil Dead movies, it feels of course. So just fighting.
There is a reason for that.
Fighting the mini ashes.
We'll get into that for things of note.
All right. But loved that. All the little leprechauns fighting the little leprechauns. So good. Just perfectly just in tune in the self-aware way of what I'd want out of these films. As far as what I have down, Tim, just last little just kind of touch moment I got a kick out of was when stoner girl gets a picture, a selfie with the leprechaun. That just tickled me. So, I just thought how cool would it be to get a selfie with a killer leprechaun? Amazing.
Oh boy.
All right. Now for Tim's section on what did not work.
She's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
All right, well, welcome to my section, What Did Not Work. Where to begin? Look, I don't disagree with pretty much everything that you're, into about this movie. It's an execution problem when it comes down to it, coupled with just the writing of the characters and then the behavior of the characters, the inconsistency within that. Like, my big thing in camp is that I think the strength of camp is the defining of characters and having them kind of stick to that definition. And, you get away with a lot, in Friday the 13th or Evil Dead or whatever, in that exactly who these people are and they stay consistent throughout. So, but in being a caricature, they still have logical sort of direction or motivation. So, for example, in Evil Dead 2, the hillbilly kind of guy, he is that guy, but he still has an opinion. He still has a point of view. He's not just dumb hillbilly throughout that is kind of irrationally doing things. He's motivated by what's going on around him.
Are you saying if you can take something to a level of caricature and make it worse and make it work as long as there is a consistency in there and a truth to that caricature?
Yes. And so that's why I said earlier, so much of that is relies on the actor maintaining that consistency too. And, I'm not going to just say the actor, it's all the actor's fault either. It's the director's job to keep them in the pocket with their performance. So not just one person is sort of at fault from what bothers me the most about this. But so, for example, in this movie, the stoner girl is not really well set up as the stoner girl. She's just set up as kind of a jerk and who kind of wants to party, but scene to scene, she's all over the place. Her character will be saying one thing and then completely contradicting that in the next scene or within that same scene. And then to your point, when she sees the leprechaun and takes a selfie with it, at first I'm thinking oh, that makes sense because she's the stoner girl. But we didn't get a setup to know that in that moment she's super baked, right? So there's just this sort of
she's drunk was the setup.
Okay, well, that's not good enough then to me. How drunk would you need to be to think that you're seeing or to not be surprised by what you're seeing?
That was what the whole scene was about, where she's been drinking all afternoon, and then he calls her out for being a drunk, and then she says to herself, man, I must be hallucinating from alcohol.
But that's my point, is they're talking that plot point out. And it just, to me, that's just bad. It doesn't work. Have the other characters in the previous scene be you're out of control. You're too drunk. You're a mess. And her be screw you. I know that I can't even remember the sequence of events. She's throwing up at one point. But if you're that drunk, it just doesn't line up with the reality of being that drunk in those particular moments, right? There's not a good sequence to lead us to feel supported by that idea that in this moment she's in the kitchen by herself drinking at night and can't distinguish or care that a weird leprechaun, deformed, burnt-faced, entity pops up. And then her reaction is very kind of nonchalant, oh yeah, let me just take a selfie with you. Oh yeah, whatever. So it's almost like they're mixing the caricature type to a bad effect. If she were the stoner And her whole thing from the moment we meet her to that moment was, I just want to be in a cloud of weed. I'm baked. I would completely get on board with her looking over and being like, what is that? And then, but it just doesn't match up for me with I think the character or caricature archetypes that they're trying to use are not only ill-defined, but they feel lazy in their definition as well as the execution by the actors of that thing. And it ends up becoming this really boring, and this is partially this is connected to my big issue with just the scenes in the movie that don't involve the leprechaun. There is nothing going on. It's super static. Almost every scene is just them talking at each other about their characters, defining aspects of their character. Those things never really change throughout the movie, right? Nobody changes their opinion or sort of their outlook. They all stick to this thing, and they scene to scene have the same conversation over and over again. So by number 2 or 3 conversation of the same thing of like, oh, this house needs to be a green house, and like, oh, something's going to go wrong again, and being upset over that, or, oh, I'm not going to sleep with this guy, like my ex-boyfriend again, and then having that conversation over and over again. Who cares? After the second time, I'm like, we're just rehashing this. And this happened in the filmmaking too, where it's like in just the plotting of the film. You had the scene with her doing the selfie with the leprechaun, and I was like, yeah, I get it. That's fine. That's funny. Sure. The next time somebody sees the leprechaun, it's the dude. He takes a selfie with the leprechaun. You cannot double down on those type of jokes unless you're going to really, really overemphasize that thing and have every single character who sees the leprechaun want to take a selfie with it. Like, you can't, it's just in the middle of nothingness. And so for me, once I sense that that's what the movie is, I'm out. I checked out. It was so difficult for me to care or engage on any level except when I like heard the leprechaun laugh and go, okay, maybe I'll kind of pay attention now because a kill is probably happening soon. And then it would, and I'd be like, yeah, that was kind of cool. And then they would cut back to 3 or 4 people standing in one place talking about the same thing. And the attempts at jokes were so flat. I hated that, I could barely understand the leprechaun when he's doing his limericks, or whatever you want to call them. But B, they weren't even bad. I love a dad joke. I love puns. I love them. My girlfriend wants to kill me most of the time because I'm constantly like making completely stupid wordplay puns on things that there isn't even a joke. I'll just change a word to something that rhymes with that word, and she'll just be like, no, stop doing that. So I'm the audience. And the like what they handed me as the person who likes that kind of stuff wasn't even at a dumb level that makes me want to laugh at it. Like, I don't know how you can miss that bad. But they did. For me, I just was like, I'm out. I don't care. I hate everything.
First, real quick, just because you reminded me, my favorite line in the movie didn't come from the leprechaun, but was when the quote unquote leader girl said, "You can't just Google how to kill a leprechaun." Just something about that delivery cracked me up. But now to actually say something to what you're saying, it's interesting because like I'm agreeing with you, and as usual, I'm like wishing, oh man, if they had just gotten Tim's pass on the script. But I'm just trying to think why I didn't notice or why it didn't bother me so much, and it was just because the pacing was just relentless. Where I thought like, before I could even notice that kind of pattern forming, I think I was just like, oh shoot, the leprechaun's already there and talking to her. Okay, we're on a roll with it. So for whatever,
I think you have an ability to be swept up in the overall of a film very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually extremely challenging for me with any movie. So I know that a movie is firing on all pistons or whatever when I find myself not thinking about structure, form, performance, technique, like any of those sort of filmmaker point of view things. If I start to let go of that stuff, I know that the movie is really doing its job well. We watched Uncharted. We went because we were like, we were super tired. We have that AMC like pass thing, forget what it's called. And we were like, oh, we got to go see something before the month is over. Otherwise, it's sort of just a waste of money. And so, but we didn't want to like go see something that involved any energy or thought. So we're like, we'll go see Uncharted. It's probably going to be super stupid, but maybe there will be some fun visuals, whatever. It is so bad, like on so many levels for the same reason. Like, no amount of cool set pieces or CGI can overcome Mark Wahlberg's just insanely bad delivery of every single line. So like it's problematic. Look, Tom Holland is amazing. Like he's a very charismatic guy. Like he's easy to watch. But the movie just suffers. Whereas The Kingsman, I was almost immediately enthralled and just like wrapped up in the story and in the world, rather than being like, oh, this is really good filmmaking. I just was like, oh my God, I'm in this world. And I think you have an ability to fall into the world of a movie very quickly that I tend to default in the opposite direction. I have to be pulled into it because it's doing its job well.
Right. Well, I guess just to be a little more specific, I feel like it depends on what the world is, because I can just as easily tune out maybe if I'm not enthralled enough with the world because of things like what you're saying.
Well, and I think in this realm, I guess is also, that's what I mean. It's like your love for this style or this type of world is capturing for you, whereas for me, I'm like, you better do it well, or else I'm just going to check out. So, to tail off of all of those overarching things, when it comes to specifics, like the acting choices of all but the lead were, they're like upsettingly unwatchable for me. I felt like the lead actress was a person. And I was like, yeah, I believe that this is a person. Do I believe every moment of the movie of hers? Like, there are times when I'm like, guys, just leave. Like, just get out of there. No, but that's a horror trope thing, and I'll accept it. But the girl the fastidious girl, I don't know what else to call her.
I called her the leader. I don't know why, but
yeah, the leader girl. Her choice to act like, I called it like Disney Channel acting, but watching an adult or near adult, I don't know what you call a 21-year-old, watching them do the acting style of 12-year-olds on the Disney Channel was one of the most distracting and like nauseating things I've ever had to endure. I couldn't believe what I was watching.
That's funny because like that's an example of I gave of there was a consistency from the first one of just being an like over the top to the nth degree stereotype.
Yeah, and like I don't know why it's so upsetting to me because
you said the lack of consistency within it.
Yeah. Well, but it is consistently what it is. Like in her case in particular, she does that thing throughout. But I think maybe it's to the previous point I was making about like it's unmotivated. It's an unmotivated choice. It's not based in anything that actually makes any sense for anything. So you're just doing a thing. You're doing I don't know what you even call that, a style, I guess, for no good reason. It doesn't like help the character. It doesn't pay off in any sort of way. It's not like we go, oh, okay, yeah, because she's this way, this comeuppance will happen and that'll, be cathartic or something like that. Whereas like, the hillbilly guy in Evil Dead, he kind of devolves because of his hillbilliness into just like, screw it all, gotta get out of here, I don't care. And I go, oh, that's connected. That makes sense to me.
Him yelling Bobby Joe is one of the most distinct like moments
amazing,
of
right?
that movie for some reason.
That is to the point of the character. So like for her to have this turn of like, I've had to do X, Y, and Z, I can handle some little miniature leprechaun, whatever she says, I forget. What?
She calls him a lawn gnome. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. But it just sucks. It's bad all around. I feel like there was a issue with the vision. Like whoever the powers that be that are making the final sort of choice, it felt like a movie that had a bunch of people who were arguing over what the movie should be. And so I don't know if the writer and the director just didn't like see it the same. Maybe there are producers who are like, yeah, we think that's a good idea, but we got to make sure it's like sticks within this other thing that the original had, or vice versa. I don't know. Who knows? It's likely all of the above. I don't know. So at the end of the day, I just hate it. Sorry.
I'll get out what I have and maybe you can expand on them or give thoughts on them. But
okay.
And it sounds like some of these are just really weird and specific. Like I'm overthinking exactly how I wouldn't want to this movie, but I guess it's to show how much I enjoyed it. These little things that distracted me. I like how those few anachronistic jokes where like he referred to, use the term Walkman and stuff like that. So in that, I was distracted when his quips felt too much like they were using modern parlance. What's the word?
I don't know.
Anyway.
Parlance.
Yeah. And then, okay, this is what I kind of brought up earlier, but like how I wouldn't want that kind of Austin Powers level self-aware joke. Like it did make me giggle kind of sort of, but at the same time, it just felt out of place. The moment where she, gives that triumphant speech of we have to defeat him and then just kind of walks away like to go off defeat them. And then she turns around and is like, oh wait, yeah, no, I don't know where I'm going. We should come up with a plan first or whatever. That was like that self-aware joke. That felt weird and out of place to me.
That's the whole movie to me.
Yeah.
That joke is the problem with the whole movie, is that they set up an idea of like what the movie should be and who the characters should be. And then they go, oh, wait, what's going on? What am I doing? The whole movie feels like that to me. Like they don't know where they're going with any of it. So nothing actually follows through to make us feel like, oh, cool, that was funny. It's cynical. It actually, I think that's what it is. It's self-aware in a cynical way that is almost feels like they don't even want to be there. They don't even want to be making this movie. That's probably what ultimately is so upsetting about it for me. Like
you feel them wanting to make the movie like in the gore and kill scenes, which I guess you said worked for you.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, those moments of inspired brilliance of the riding the drone and the
those
the
set
faucets
pieces are fine.
So last thing I had was this was kind of your question of what's motivating the leprechaun. And this is also an example of what I think is interesting is when are they thinking too much about trying to explain things in this world? But the first one, it's like super weird and vague in a way that's working for me of why he exactly has to kind of kill people, like if all he wants is his gold. It's just sort of like feels like it's because it's a horror movie and it's obligatory and they're kind of in his way, or he kind of just has a desire to. It's not
he kind of
defined.
just likes it.
Yeah. So taking it to the level of having to define that as part of his motivation for me in this one, where he says, I like killing people and it gives me power, and only if I get one more kill. Like that was the kind of thing where I'd rather just have it be weirdly unexplained and just kind of don't leave those rules in a fog for me versus trying to define them.
Never have the power be defined by the person who's gaining the power. Have it be discovery through the other characters, because that then creates conflict. Them going, why can't we defeat it? Having somebody get killed and then them seeing him get more powerful gives them a hurdle to have to get over. It gives them a problem to solve. But if he just goes, I like doing this and that's fun and it makes me more powerful, there's no conflict in that. We just go, okay, you've just told us the plot.
I mean, I just think it was one thing too many. I just rather have it. His gold gives him the power, being close to it, having more gold. That's it. So this one, I'm just like, guys, you didn't need to justify his weird tendencies of why exactly he's killing anyone at any given point. Like, we get it. Right. Like, that was an example of just where it went too far in that regard for me. And that's all I had. But I had some things of note, questions for you, if that's all you had for what did not work.
I mean, the only other thing I want to say is that, like, kind of to this previous point of, like, that I agree, they seemed excited as filmmakers to get to the gore and the kills and those set pieces and such. And those were the best parts of the movie. But I don't know how would you put this? To throw away the in-between scenes at the level that they did of like, just whatever, let's just get through it. It is insulting to me as a viewer. And that makes me angry, because then all I'm thinking is, I'm mad now that this movie even got funded. And this director, this will lead us into things of note, like, he's done a number of things that I think are fine. And the writer is a writer that has done things that I really like. So, it's confounding to me, and then that makes me annoyed and upset. So, want to know who they were?
In our next section.
Yeah, exactly.
Here we go. Things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
Okay, so let's start with the writer. Suzanne Keilly, I think is how you say her name, but it might be Keilly. She wrote for Ash vs. the Evil Dead. Like, I love that show. I'm rewatching that show. I love that show so much. And you can see the influence of that style in this movie, 100%. But what was she doing with all the rest of the scenes? Like, there is inconsistency in just the conversations between people that makes absolutely no sense. I mean, in particular, the scene where this stoner girl just lashes out and, like, says some really mean shit to the lead girl. And it's so out of left field. And then her whole thing of, like, I'll agree to what the leprechaun says so that I can get away. It's like, that's late second act stuff for this sort of betrayal type thing. It's just it's really off. I guess ultimately I would want to ask the writer, like, how many drafts did they let you have? Because this does not feel like you got enough time. Scene to scene, it feels like it's not finished.
This is just a what if exercise because I'm really fascinated by, can you, and this is really weird, but to like further kind of define, okay, you know, we were kind of using those terms as kind of with an understanding of what they meant, an intentional camp versus an unintentional camp, you know, a weird happenstance that you can only weird details you can only kind of come up with if you've kind of seen incompetent on some level versus knowing on this level. So that's, I mean, that word is what I'm getting at already. It's like, what's the differentiation between those filmmakers? I don't think there's a polite way to put it. Like, is it a sort of competency or sort of level of smarts behind being aware of what movies are and having seen enough movies and being able to translate that? So just if we're able to, like, even if that's a little insulting or whatever, just, I don't know how else you'd define it or get on board with it. But I don't know. Wait, any thoughts on that real quick before I ask my real question?
I wonder about this a lot. Why can two different people kind of attempt the same thing and one be so successful and one be so unsuccessful?
But like what I was asking was specifically within a level of self-awareness or not. Right.
I'm not sure that you can manufacture it. I don't know. This is sort of maybe a cheap answer, I guess, because it's not really an answer. But at the end of the day, I think that some people just have a natural sensibility around camp that is not a thinking exercise. It's just how they see the world, and it sort of lines up, and they're able to execute it.
Like Larry Cohen with The Stuff.
Yes. Whereas a lot of the times that we complain the most about camp missing, and I mean, I'm guessing here, but it feels like my memory of it is that often that is these are examples of filmmakers who are trying to recreate a feeling rather than it just existing from what it is. Like the campiness is a result of the experience of making the film, not the film is aiming at making something campy.
It's just interesting. There's the line there of like Night of the Demons, which I'd say is wholly successful in what we're saying as sort of an unintentional, you know, whatever goes, just kind of magic that comes from it. But at the same time, I know we weren't as crazy about it just because of some of the more sort of standard filmmaking things that we wish they did get right.
Sure. No, I know. It's a really hard thing. I just think it may just fall into this undefinable realm where some people can do it and some people can't.
So you were speaking well of one of the screenwriters. I have not seen The Void, but you recommended it. So it sounds like, you know, the director knows what he's doing or you're a fan of his to some extent. So
yeah, I think The Void is absurd in a very certain kind of way where it's, God, how do I describe this? You're going, like, he has a sensibility that is dark and weird and almost otherworldly, and that's why The Void works, because that movie kind of is all of those things. I was just looking him up to he's done a couple other things that I was actually surprised to see that's what he had done. Oh yeah, Stephen Kostanski. He understands camp, obviously, because he did Psycho Gorman. And The Void is campy in its own way. I don't know. There's a part of me, this is totally speculation, that feels like he didn't want to do this movie.
It sounds like, though, let's say, again, just for an exercise, let's say they were given all the time in the world to write the script, because you're right. Maybe it is just that they were under the ticking clock or under the gun. but maybe it just is on the level of screenwriting for you, it sounds like, is what the issues were. Because it sounds like your biggest issues were sort of consistency of character. Yeah. So
no, it's directing too, though. It just is.
I haven't even got to my big question for you, which I'm kind of getting at is, let's say, obviously you and I talking about this level of detail. If you and I were assigned the task to make Leprechaun Returns, how would we approach that? Or people like us, whatever. People, we're thinking on this level of detail or whatnot. We want to plan it as well as we can. Is there any kind of way to just sort of recreate that F-it attitude, that sort of the Larry Cohens of the world, the guy who made the original Leprechaun, sorry, I'm forgetting his name, can sort of strike that? My first thought is like, I'm all about, like, if you go making a movie, like, stay stone cold sober, like you really take care of your health and wellness and mental acuity during it all. But I'm wondering if the spirit of these kinds of Leprechaun films are like how I watched them 10 years ago with a friend and likely very stoned, was do you get intoxicated and make this movie with a bunch of friends? Like,
probably
you try your hardest, like in the screenwriting phase, to get what you get right, but then you sort of stop caring at a certain level, but at the same time you do care. I don't know. You see what I'm asking or proposing?
I 100% do. And I think for me, what it would be is the true failings of this movie are certain rules that they just kind of throw around that don't. This movie is not. I think they're going off the assumption that the rules are the rules of the first movie and we can just kind of ride that wave. But that's not enough for a sequel. Like, you have to have rules for the sequel. Like, you have to have rules for this movie that are this movie's rules. And as a part of those rules, there has to be an actual goal. So what is, if the goal can't just be vaguely defeat the leprechaun. Of course that's the goal. But like in intertwining the goal with the rules is how you figure out the how of the movie, the solve of the movie. And everything needs to come from there. So that's why I kind of asked, like, what's the goal? Like, what would ultimately get him to stop killing people and go away? And does that even exist? So you have to go through this exploration, I think, in the early phase of screenwriting to define these rules. Okay, like, what does he want? How does he get that? Why can't he get that? What would happen if he got that? What happens when he doesn't get that? In this case, it's his gold. What are the flaws within what he wants? And then do all of that with the main character in the face of this thing, because that's the movie, right? Like, he doesn't exist without him needing his gold. So there's a curse. There's a thing that like, can you solve the curse? Are there solves? Until you know the answer to all of those things, you don't really have a movie. You're just throwing scenes around and having kills, which is ultimately what this movie, for me, ended up being.
So, but what I'm saying is, like, if the first one you have, like what I gave the example of, in reaching a certain level of just tone and fun, of they just seem to either be blissfully unaware or not care about justifying the leprechaun's motivations to also be killing people, right? This one seemed like an example of overthinking and having to justify it. So could the equivalent of someone who's overthinking these, or just trying to think out all these rules, could the equivalent be, if you can't get on board with a sort of not thinking about it or not caring logic like the first one, can you recreate that with stoner logic, let's say?
Yes. If you have like one basic rule that you stick to, which let's just say the rule is the leprechaun kills the longer he doesn't get his way. He's a psychopath. Great, no problem. Just stick to that.
Again,
and
I
then just
still
go
don't think
nuts.
I still don't think you need a rule at all for his motivation for killing. And again, that's what I liked about the original is like you don't have a rule for his killing. All he says is, "I want me gold. I want me gold." You know, it's all we
that.
get.
I mean, we're basically saying the same thing. The rule that I'm talking about is that all he wants is his gold. That's what makes him psychotic. He's not getting his gold. You don't need to overly define it. You just say that's what he needs, and the more he doesn't get it, the more insane things get.
Do you think weed would be helpful for getting on a certain kind of logic for making this kind of film versus can you actually preordain a kind of whatever attitude that might be coming from the original Leprechaun or Troll 2s of the world and the filmmakers who made them?
I mean, I think it's always tricky to try to kind of create a vibe. So, you know, maybe, yeah, I don't really know that the answer to that, but sure, as give it a shot. See if weed helps. I don't know. You know, like even if it even just do as an exercise in the writing phase, see what you get baked and see what you come up with, and then be like, oh, that worked. Let's ride that wave.
I'm more of the thought I'm more of the mindset now where it's like, it's not, weed wouldn't give me new ideas, but it is just, you know, me, and I can tap into that no matter what. But I think I'd be on board with it. You're saying it's like, as an exercise, we know what kind of movie this is, and people will probably be baked watching it. So why not just try to influx a bit of that energy into this?
Yeah.
All right.
But I always do think it's dangerous to try and kind of, I mean, this, like a lot of these requel films are trying to recreate, or whatever you would call it, get us to the nostalgia of the originals. And it's like, you ultimately can't. So maybe don't try to do that so much as, you know, find your own version of what made you like the movie originally and aim at that rather than doing another, you know, rehash of the original.
And that's why I really was trying to define, here are traits that can still work in an aware way, and a thinking about, you know, what are some sort of recreatable traits about the original and films like it.
I don't know, man. I think when you have a nutty film, you got to get nutty. You got to get excited. You got to get pumped up. You got to just be like, everything is on the table. Everything. Let's go crazy. But what you can't do is nothing, which is what all the scenes in between the kills are doing.
Right.
They're doing nothing.
So, yeah, that all what you're saying was fully there for the kill scenes for me, and you're just kind of seemed like in the end we're hampered by that kind of energy not being there for the in-between scenes, the rest of it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, we should wrap this up. So last little things of note that I have is just, I thought the similarities to our Scream requel, Scream 5, that came out were pretty funny in that, again, this came out a few years before the new Scream, but that you have a ghost version of someone who's, you know, connected to the protagonist of the original showing up to assist the quote unquote crazy girl or unstable girl, a protagonist of the new one in a ghost form. That just cracked me up, that similarity.
Well, and also that it's the daughter of somebody who had mental illness, and it's funny.
Yeah, great. All right, well, we should wrap it up here. We like to do that with RecommenDEADtions. So just looking at what I watched recently, just because it was newly released by Criterion on 4K Blu-ray, I checked out the movie Menace to Society. It had been on my watch list, seeing that it was a Hughes Brothers directed movie, and they directed From Hell, which I loved when it came out, and I would be very interested to dismember on our show here. But anyway, just in short, I really liked it. It was a really cool balance of just sort of dealing with situations and portrayals and subject matter that was starkly realistic, but with a heavy style, bringing all that out as well. So really interesting meld of those two kinds of, I don't know, extremes or energies, whatever. Check it out. Menace to Society.
Cool. I'm going to recommend Dead, a documentary that is one of the most fear-inducing, for me, things I've watched in a long time. It's called The Rescue. It's about a cave system in Thailand that, you know, is sort of like it's like a national park kind of thing, but people kind of have free reign. You can go in there, and there's like a time of year when you can go in, and it's totally safe and no big deal. And it's extremely expansive, this cave system. A soccer team, kids, like 12-year-old kids, went in there with their coach, and a monsoon sort of style storm came early and flooded the tunnel system, the cave system, and they get trapped in there. And they have to be rescued. And the rescue effort was insane. I mean, truly insane. Diving teams and like Navy from different countries showed up. Like it is one of the most insane movies. I mean, just story. It's a true story. It's actual footage from this event. And I'm particularly like, it's my two main fears in one, which is like I have a strange fear of caves. And I have insanely high levels of claustrophobia that are wrapped up in that cave sort of realm, as well as underwater stuff. So it's an incredibly well done documentary, as well as extremely scary from the point of view of somebody who these things induce quite a lot of anxiety for me. So it's great. I mean, it's really, really well done, and it's moving and sad and all of the above. So definitely check it out. The Rescue.
Great. All right. Check those out, folks, should you be interested. That's it for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another 2022 new release film. And it's refreshingly not part of our existing IP or franchise. We'll be back with Ty West's new film, X. Really looking forward to that.
Hot damn.
All right, everyone. So in closing, we hope you get your pot of gold. Thanks for listening.
And we will see you next time.
Goodbye.